Right. So today I'd like to speak to you about your miracle power to create the life that you really want. But it's a power that you probably don't really utilize to its fullest capacity. In fact, you may be uh, using the antithesis of this power more often than you use this power. I found that most people seem to completely misunderstand this power. They therefore are not using it appropriately, and they suffer as a result of that. And in fact, I found that I think this is true. I haven't done a formal inventory of this, but it seems to me that of the people who I work with, those people who use this power are able to have success, and those who don't use this power generally end up struggling, have been struggling, and continue to struggle unless or until they start to use this power. So it's really important it's a really important power in your ability to create consciously what it is that you want. Uh, And that power is the miracle power of acceptance. So, as I said, most people misunderstand this power. They think of acceptance as like a resignation, and that's not what it is at all. So, I'd like to explore it in a little bit more detail today, because I think that once you actually start to understand and appreciate this power, then it will start to open up things for you that previously had seemed to be closed. Um, so as I say, one of the biggest obstacles in using this power, I think, is that most people seem to misunderstand it. I can't tell you how many times it is that I've proposed to somebody that acceptance is likely a missing ingredient and likely something that would be helpful for them in a specific situation that they've described to me. And they give me a terrible look, and and I can tell, and then I'll ask for clarification just to make sure that I'm not completely making this up. They believe that acceptance means to just be resigned to something. They think that it's necessary to resist whatever it is that they don't like. And I think that there are a lot of teachings that reinforce that idea, that propose that there's no need or value in acceptance, that you should just resist, deny, reject whatever it is that you don't like. So the problems with that are many. Uh, so one of the big problems with that common approach of denying what you don't like, rejecting what you don't like, resisting what you don't like, is that doing so by virtue of the law of attention means that you're putting your attention on what you don't want. Whenever you resist something, your attention is on that. And whatever you put your attention on, that's where your energy goes. So if you just take inventory of your life, you'll probably notice that whatever you resist persists. And I'm suggesting to you a fairly plausible reason for why that is, which is that when you resist something, you're putting your attention on it. Therefore, your energy is going towards the very thing that you don't want. So what you resist gets the energy because you're putting your attention on it. And because it gets the energy, it's reinforced. So you get more of the very thing that you don't want. So that's one big problem with the common approach of resistance. So we could say acceptance, you could understand acceptance as non-resistance. I think that that's one. useful way of understanding acceptance, but it's not the only way of understanding acceptance. So I would like to invite you here today to a more well-rounded understanding of acceptance. But as a starting point, we could understand that acceptance could be viewed as non-resistance. Now, I don't particularly like negations like that because, for the same reason that I just mentioned, if we frame acceptance as non-resistance, then if you're as long as you're thinking of it that way, then your attention goes to resistance. But as a starting point, because most of us are very familiar, whether consciously or not, with the experience of resistance, it can be useful to at least use that as a starting point, and then start to be curious about, well, what would non-resistance be? What would it be like to have the absence of resistance? Uh, so most people, again, they will then immediately go to, well, that's resignation. But notice that there's a difference between the experience of resignation and the absence of resistance. Resignation actually requires some effort on your part. You have to do something, albeit perhaps somewhat subtly, in order to produce the experience of resignation. Most people do not experience resignation in a positive way. Most people experience resignation as something that they feel defeated. They feel there's some negative spin on that. There's something that's somewhat suppressed in that experience of resignation. So just notice that there is a difference between resignation versus the absence of resistance. So perhaps you might notice, and I'm inviting you to notice this right now in your actual experience in this moment. You could notice that if you were to explore at least the possibility of non-resistance, the absence of resistance, what do you notice? Perhaps you notice that there's an open quality. So we're not filling some space with resignation or with enthusiasm or excitement or anything else. We're actually just allowing that space to remain. So it's an absence of resistance, meaning there's just this space. So notice that there's an open quality to it. And notice that in that openness, there's actually infinite possibility. So whereas resignation is still focused on whatever it is that you're resisting, in a sense, if you're resigned to something, it's something that you don't want. Or that you didn't want. So if you're resigned to it, then your attention is, at least in part, still on the thing that you don't want. And as long as your attention is on what you don't want, then your attention is not on this open quality that is inviting of infinite potential. And so in a state of resignation, you're kind of closed. You're not open to the infinite possibilities. So acceptance, in as far as we're viewing it as non-resistance, is an open state that is inviting and welcoming of infinite possibilities. See, we're always actually existing in this sea of infinite possibility. It's always here. There's no actual hard limit. There's no real limitation other than the limitations of our own perceptions. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily the case that you can snap your fingers and have everything be the way that you want it to be. And I'm pointing that out because sometimes people misunderstand that and they think, well, if there's infinite possibilities, then I should be able to snap my fingers and everything should be the way I want it to be. I should be able to instantly change other people and circumstances and the past and everything. I should be able to do that. While in theory that may be possible, in practice, usually doesn't work that way. And so here again, we could apply uh, acceptance. If you notice, you ever have that kind of impatience or that kind of frustration, say, well, I should be able to do these things in theory, and I should be able to have these abilities. You could notice that acceptance, in the sense of this open quality, is what invites for movement, for change, for transformation. Because if you're still resisting, then you're in a state that's closed off to those infinite possibilities. You're still fixated on what you don't want. So, so again, you can notice this acceptance in terms of non-resistance, and just notice what else you can notice about it. So I notice that it's effortless. And sometimes people misunderstand this as well because at first they say, well, no, I'm not so sure that it's effortless. It seems rather effortful to me. And I think that oftentimes what happens is that initially it's easy to misunderstand uh, being conscious as effort. But there's a difference. So being conscious may be, let's say, it may be energy intensive, but it's not effortful. There's no strain involved. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Because if you think about it, resistance requires effort and strain. You're having to push against something to try and keep something away. And uh, so, and that's a habit. That's a habit that's developed because you've practiced it. We've all practiced it. That's what society has taught us. Society teaches us to resist. I mean, I think it's probably a double whammy because I think for it's probably there in our in our not even non-socialized conditioning. I mean, I think it's probably there just in our DNA or something like that, to resist. And then it's reinforced by the social conditioning, which teaches us to resist. Uh, so you can notice though that that requires effort and strain to resist because it's a habit, because we have practiced that so much, then it's unconscious and it's therefore automatic. It's our knee-jerk reaction to things. So, in order to change that, in order to experience uh, acceptance, requires being conscious because you have to bring conscious awareness to yourself in order to bring about that change. Well, as I say, that being conscious, being present is in some ways energy intensive, but that's not the same as effort because actually, if you notice, to allow for acceptance, to allow for this open state, this open quality, to allow yourself to be receptive to infinite possibilities. actually involves, if you pay close attention, you'll notice that it involves inhibiting all of the habitual impulses to make effort. So for, for most of us, we're so wound up that we're and reactive. So every little thing that happens, every sensation, everything that we see, all of it is triggering these reactions, these impulses to react. So we're being uh, confronted, I guess you could say, moment to moment with these arising impulses that want that suggest that we should react, that we should do something, that we should fix something, that there's some kind of problem that we need to be solving right now. And that um, is is very effortful. So to choose acceptance does require that you're conscious and that you're aware of those impulses to react and that you choose to let go. That you it's not about fighting against the impulses. It's not about trying to suppress the impulses. It's about noticing the impulses and allowing the impulses, but without indulging them. So it's a very I've talked about, I don't remember if I talked about this last week. I certainly have talked about it from time to time. It's worth mentioning again here. Um, that society generally teaches us two ways of dealing with any phenomenon. One is to indulge. So we have an impulse and we can indulge that. So we indulge it by acting it out. So uh, if we feel an angry impulse, then we can act it out by shouting, by saying aggressive things, by doing aggressive actions. If we are experiencing a fearful impulse, then we can act that out by hiding or running away or something like that. So, so that's indulgence. And then there, society teaches us suppression as the second strategy. So suppression means that you try to uh, bottle it up or keep it down. So you don't express it. You don't allow it. You try and numb yourself. You try to, through strain, through distraction, through uh, various kind of abusing various kinds of things. We learn to try and suppress, numb. Well, neither of these strategies work very well. As I've said before, I think that indulgence actually is a superior strategy to suppression because well, at least it causes less harm in most cases to ourselves. But the unfortunate thing is that indulgence is not socially acceptable, generally speaking. And so, uh, so we're kind of caught in a bind because we only have two strategies that we know. And one of them is socially unacceptable, and the other one, which is what most of us rely upon quite heavily, causes tremendous amounts of harm to ourselves. So there is a third approach. And I guess you could say acceptance. You could even call that third approach acceptance. Or you could say, which is what I'm going to say here, that this third approach is a necessary component of acceptance. So it's about welcoming, meeting, allowing what is exactly as it is without trying to modify it, change it, get rid of it, judge it. So you could just notice right now whatever impulses may arise. And there are so many impulses that are arising, even in this moment, as we're just here, presumably relatively calm. But there are all of these impulses, constant monitoring of what problems there might be, and then these impulses to react to all of these supposed problems. And this is happening largely unconsciously, but you can make it at least somewhat conscious right now just by just noticing the impulses. So you could maybe notice them as thoughts or mental images or maybe sensations, reactions, tension in the body, just a general sense of not being at ease, not being able to relax, not feeling comfortable. So you could notice probably in regard to most of these impulses, and I mean, I don't know how to quantify it, but there's so many. I mean, it's probably on the scale of multiple impulses per second. So uh, notice most of them are largely unconscious, but just as you put your attention on this, you might notice these impulses and notice that in regard to most of them, you probably are suppressing. So uh, the good news is that I guess I'll start with the bad news. Bad news is that all that suppression causes you a tremendous amount of harm. Good news is that you can learn how to change that. So this third approach, whether we call that allowing or welcoming, meeting, whatever you want to call it, is to just notice how you have to make effort either to indulge or to suppress. And here it's about not making that effort. So it's about allowing for that space. So prior to the arising impulse, there's already space. And then the impulse arises, and the there's a reaction. There's a habitual reaction to the impulse, and it closes that space. It's a contraction. And the possibility is just to remain open or to reopen. So you can just give yourself permission to actually be at ease. And if that's not familiar to you or comfortable yet, that's okay. That's maybe even normal. And like most things that are worth while in life, it takes some patience and persistence to work with this. Um, if this is not something that you're already familiar with, I highly recommend working with breath awareness as a way to cultivate more of this in your life because it's very powerful and very accessible for anybody who doesn't have access to the free self-awareness course that I offer on my website. I encourage you to get access to that. It's at joeylott.com/SA, the letter S, the letter A. And on YouTube, I'll provide a link in the description for people who want to get access to that. Um, Working with something like breath awareness on a regular basis will help you to slow down internally and to be able to recognize more and more of these subtle impulses, and to have the trust and the skill and the self-awareness to be able to allow the impulses without indulging or suppressing. And what happens when you do that is that you start to reclaim your energy. See, a lot of your energy has been locked up um, in these latent impulses. So you've encountered all kinds of things in your life, all kinds of experiences, things that have happened, and you locked up these reactions to those things because on some level, largely unconsciously, your nervous system, let's say, determined this is something I need to hold on to so that I can know how to react and keep myself safe in the future. And that's part of learning, but that's sort of the learning process needs a garbage collection. Because not all learning is equally important. Not all learning is equally valid. And most of what we have learned is invalid and unhelpful. And that's not because of anything wrong with you. That's just how it goes. So that's normal. It's okay. And the missing piece, though, is this garbage collection, which is designed to be able to go through and figure out and discern what of this learning is important and what of it is not. But what has happened because of our lack of self-awareness, because of how society has trained us, because of the dominant energy and consciousness of society in general, then what happens is the garbage isn't getting collected. And so we've got stored within ourselves this huge amount of unhelpful, unskillful learnings. And they surface through these impulses when they're triggered because of things that we're encountering in our environment or in our own minds. And so these things are triggered. But when we indulge or suppress, then all of that just gets stored again. It gets shoved back down because either it with indulgence, then the when we indulge, it reinforces this was a valid learning, good thing that I indulged this. It kept me safe. If we suppress, then more or less the same thing. It feeds back that, well, I guess this really was important learning because why else would I have needed to be so tense and reactive unless this was a valid learning? So it just gets stored again for later. It doesn't get garbage collected. But when you go through, when you utilize this third way, which I've been describing, calling it allowing, I'll just call it allowing, welcoming. Not sure which one to call it. Uh, then what this does is it activates the garbage collection system. So it tags this now as don't need this. So and that's just the truth. In 99.99999% of the stuff that we've learned, the impulses that arise, don't need it. And so every time that you allow or welcome, you're and you and you see that through, then there's that gets garbage collected. And so then that's freed up that energy, which was locked up into that process that was stored in you. That energy gets freed up. So now, and that's your creative energy. That's your life force. So it's freed up. So now you can utilize that for the things that are important to you. I mean, you could utilize it for anything. You could use it for things that are not important to you, but I would certainly recommend utilizing it for the things that are important to you. But as long as that's all locked up, and again, keep in mind, it's sort of like death by a thousand cuts because uh, any one of these little learnings, these little latent things that's there that gets triggered as these impulses, any one of them is so small that it's virtually insignificant. But when you consider the sheer volume of them, then we're talking about a massive amount of your energy, which is bound up in these unhelpful learnings that are being stored as these latent impulses. So, and it's even worse than that. It's a double whammy because not only is that energy not available to you, it's not freed up, but also you spend a tremendous amount of your time and your energy reacting to these impulses which are being triggered. So, is it any wonder then why you experience the things that you experience that you don't like? If you experience things like disappointment, frustration, irritation, impatience, regrets, despair. Uh, these are all indications of exactly what I've been describing, which is your energy, your life force being locked up in all of these unhelpful learnings that are stored as latent impulses. And so as you start to free this energy, then you now have it's a double win because on the one hand, now that energy is freed up and available to you to direct toward what you want. And for another thing, your time is more freed up because you're less triggered. So fewer of those impulses. Your mind can start to become more quiet. And that allows you to then have better discernment, to be able to recognize what's true for you, what's aligned with your soul, what you really truly want and desire, what's good for you, how to take action on that. All of that comes as a byproduct of what it is that I'm describing today. So, this allowing or welcoming, you could, as I said earlier, you could understand that as acceptance, but I think of that more as a necessary skill for acceptance. I think of acceptance as something slightly larger than allowing. Allowing is a component, in my view. So you could, and remember, I've suggested that one way of understanding, one facet of acceptance is could be understood as non-resistance. So we could say it's non-resistance, non-indulgence. So when you notice whatever it is that's bubbling up within you, these feelings, these thoughts, these impulses, you could choose to slow down, notice the contraction, the tension, and make the choice to soften, to let go, and to welcome and allow. And notice that as you do, and I'm inviting you to do this now as I'm speaking, with whatever it is that's arising, Hopefully, it's not what's arising right now is not particularly intense, and so maybe that makes it easier. Uh, but even if what's arising seems intense, then what what no better time than the present to begin to explore this uh, capacity for welcoming and allowing, because the alternative is, as I've described, you either indulge or you suppress, and in either case, you reinforce the existing conditioning which led to that unwanted, unpleasant experience in the first place, guaranteeing that you will have more of the same. So, whatever is arising, be it intense or non-intense, pleasant, unpleasant, however you deem it, whatever you notice, you could choose now to notice how it is that you habitually react with tension, with contraction, with effort, trying to do something with it, either get rid of it, indulge it, suppress it, do something with it. And instead, you could let go of that effort. You could let go of that tension and notice that as you do that, then there's maybe a still a sense of energy. And maybe you like that energy, and maybe you don't like that energy, or maybe you don't know what to think of the energy. And any of those are possibilities. Regardless of your opinion or judgment of the energy, you could just continue to be aware and to let go of the impulses to do something with it, to react to it. And this is just an experiment, let's say. So if you, I'm proposing that this is enormously valuable, but you may or may not know that just yet. So this is just something to work with and try out and see what happens. It's not going to harm you. In fact, the more you work with it, the more you'll see that what you've habitually done was what was harming you. So you just continue to notice whatever it is that arises, and you don't have to know what it's called. You don't have to know where it came from. If you have a name for it, that's great. You can call it by the name that you have for it. But it's not necessary to have a name for it or a story about it. And in many ways, the more that you work with this suggestion, the more that you'll probably find that you're not really sure what any of it is called or what it means. Because really, it's just fundamentally energy. It's your own energy. It's your life force. So you can just continue to allow in this way. And as you're allowing in this way, all kinds of things could happen. You might find that it starts to be pleasant. Maybe you find that it grows in intensity. Maybe everything goes neutral. Maybe things seem to disappear. It's no one way. So I'm just pointing out that anything could happen. So it's not about getting to a particular outcome. Uh, the outcomes will come and I'm proposing will be good, probably superior to anything that you've actually imagined for yourself, hard as that might be to believe. if you've imagined things that you thought were really wonderful, I think you'll find that this is even more wonderful, but you have to be willing to work with it. Probably for more than 5 minutes, probably for more than a day, even. So it's a lifelong exploration. Um, so this I'm proposing is a fundamental skill for acceptance. But then this acceptance also is so you'll recall I proposed, and you may or may not find this to be the case, but probably you will. I proposed that this acceptance is has an open quality to it. And so it's maybe not hard to make that connection between allowing and this open quality, at least as I've described, as I've prompted for allowing. I've suggested that you could notice for allowing that you're habitually making effort and tensing up, and you can choose to soften and let go. And it's not hard to understand how that would facilitate a state of openness. I also propose that acceptance has a quality of uh, infinite possibilities. So there's another aspect to this, which is a receptivity. So on the one hand, and obviously these kind of go together, but on the one hand, there's this self-awareness and the noticing of the impulses to contract, to withdraw, to protect, to act out, and to just soften and let go, which facilitates this open quality. Then there's also a receptive quality, to be receptive to the infinite possibilities. So there's to also allow for all of those possibilities without trying to grasp them or trying to uh, do anything with them, at least not at this point. Because if you notice, as soon as you grasp, then you're closing things again. There's a closed quality. So grasping is antithetical to this energy of acceptance. And we don't want to do that, at least not prematurely, because sometimes we think, ooh, this is a really good idea. I need to grasp at this one. But you don't know that maybe that's the least of the good ideas. Maybe you've got so many better ideas that are there for you, but you'll miss them if you grasp at the lesser good ideas. So there's no need to be greedy or fearful or come from a poverty consciousness thinking, oh, there's not enough, this is the best I can get, or anything like that. No, know that there's so many possibilities that for good, for delight, for joy, for contentment, for fulfillment, so many possibilities. And the more that you're willing to explore in this way with acceptance, uh, the more that will be clear to you. And this will allow you to have more calm, to know that you don't need to be greedily grasping at anything. There's more than enough. There's more than enough good for everybody. And nobody else is going to get your good anyway. So, and you don't have to strain and struggle for your good because your good is you. Your good is already fundamentally the truth of you. So it's not going to go somewhere. So acceptance allows you to start to really have more trust and recognition of that. So many wonderful things can come from this, which I hope that you're starting to recognize. And if you're willing to continue to work with this uh, over time, many days, weeks, months, years, the longer you work with it, the more you'll recognize uh, how powerful, how uh, wonderful, how miraculous this power of acceptance really is. So, now I'll give you a few more thoughts about this. One is that acceptance is can be applied in any situation, whether you like something, you don't like something, whether you something seems to be working out in your favor or something seems to not be working out in your favor. So let's start with when things seem to not be working out in your favor, or you don't like something. Acceptance is what allows you to have clarity so that you can naturally take the best actions in the best frame of mind in order to have the best outcomes. Because if you're not doing that, if you're resisting, if you're struggling, if you're fighting, if you're frantic, if you're panicking, if you're reactive, if you're angry, if you're fearful, if you're greedy, then you're cutting yourself off from the infinite possibilities. You're acting on a very small amount of your total capacities, and you're going to repeat past mistakes. It's guaranteed because you're unconscious in that moment. So you have no choice but to repeat what you've already done in the past. And in that state, it's going to be 99.9% likely it's going to be past mistakes. So acceptance is like, I think of it a little bit like if you have ever been to an amusement park or something of that sort where they have maps that will have a uh, an indicator to let you know where it will say you are here on the map. And so I think of it a little bit like that. Acceptance is what allows you to know where you are because you can only act meaningfully from where you are. If you're trying to act from somewhere other than where you are, then you're not going to get good results. It's just, it's like if you're following a map, but you don't know where you are on that map, then the directions that you're taking from the map are not going to actually help you. They won't work for you. You have to know where you are in order to be able to make use of it. And acceptance is what does that. Acceptance is what gives you a sense of you are here in life. So you always are oriented correctly. You always know where you are. And that means that you can always work in the most intelligent way because you have as much information as possible and you're receptive to all of the possibilities. So when things seem to not be going the way that you want, when you're feeling discouraged, disappointed, fearful, worried, angry, reactive, it's a great time to work with acceptance. It will help you out tremendously because every mistake is costly in life. And it's inevitable that we will make mistakes. But one thing that you have the power for certain to do is to ensure that you don't repeat the same mistake twice. But most people repeat the same mistakes, not just twice, not just three times, not just four times, not just 100 times, but endlessly repeating the same mistakes. And with acceptance, acceptance gives the ability, the power to not repeat the same mistake twice, or at least no more. Even if you've repeated it 10,000 times, there's no need to do it 10,001 times. And acceptance gives you the ability to do that, because the reason why we keep repeating the same mistakes is we don't know where we are. We're not acknowledging the truth of where we are in our understanding, where we are in our maturity, where we are in our, in relation to our goals. So when people are taught, society teaches us to deny, to reject, it's a denial of where we are. We're rejecting the knowledge of where we are. And so we're putting ourselves in a precarious position where we're basically trying to navigate blindly. And so I highly recommend making use of the power of acceptance when things are not going the way that you want. So anytime that you're feeling disappointed, discouraged, frustrated, angry, irritable, sad, it's jealous, envious, resentful. It's a great opportunity for working with, those are reminders, I would say, to work with your power of acceptance. When you do, uh, when you do it correctly, then at least two things will happen that are good things. I mean, more than that, but two that I'll mention. One is you're going to feel better, not necessarily the way that you think you want to feel, but you will feel better because you're going to no longer be hurting yourself in the way that you usually do. Yes, there might be intensity. Yes, you might even perceive that as uncomfortable, but you won't be hurting yourself. And the more that you acclimate to that, the more that you'll recognize how much better that is. Second thing is that you will be opening yourself to and receptive to all of the possibilities. So you'll start to get new, better, and inspired ideas that are more aligned with what's true for you at a soul level. And that's going to help you to actually experience more fulfillment in your life rather than chasing after the things that never really gave you fulfillment and never could really give you fulfillment. Because a lot of the time, what happens is we get stuck in these traps of reacting to disappointments over things that we thought we wanted, but in truth, we never even really wanted. But we can just stay stuck in that loop for a long, 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 long time. So acceptance allows you to break that cycle and to start to really recognize where you are, where you want to go. And then there's a clear path that starts to present itself. Not necessarily always comfortable or easy, not necessarily always convenient, but vastly superior to everything else that I'm aware of. Like I said earlier, it seems to me from the people who I have worked with who uh, who just reject acceptance, who refuse to work with acceptance, I notice that they typically stay stuck. And the people who are willing to work with acceptance, their lives begin to shift in positive ways. So I think it's a really fundamental differentiator. Um, the other thing, of course, is acceptance is also important when things are going the way that you think you want them to go. Uh, and if you think about the word acceptance, it's right there in the word. It involves accepting, as in receiving. If you receive a gift, you accept the gift. So acceptance is to receive. So if you really want to receive what it is that is being gifted to you, if you really want to receive the life that has been gifted to you, if you really want to receive the blessings that have been gifted to you, if you really want to receive the good, then acceptance is also important. And it's the same acceptance. But notice sometimes when things seem to be going well, things are going the way that you want, sometimes maybe you become fearful. Sometimes maybe you become anxious. Sometimes maybe you become greedy. And so you can notice that then, even though in theory things are going well, you're actually hurting yourself. And you're not really in a state of receptivity. You're in a closed state. So you're not really able to receive all of the blessings that are occurring. And so acceptance also allows you to receive all of the blessings. Now, the real truth is, from my perspective, it's all blessings because it's all feedback. So even when things seem to not be going well, according to how we might think of them, it's still blessings because it's offering feedback that allows us to come more and more into alignment of our expression, our self-expression with our soul. Because that's how we really experience true fulfillment. I mean, if you think about it, when your fulfillment is not something that can be determined externally by anybody else's standards. So it's something very intimate and personal to you, and only you really have access to what that is, and it's your own soul. It's the alignment with that. When you're perfectly aligned in your expression with your soul, then you experience fulfillment. And so the working with acceptance allows you more and more of that because it makes you receptive to the feedback, to all of the blessings of that feedback, which are just letting you know, I'll nudge it a little bit this way, a little bit that way. You're a little bit out of alignment. And the more that you receive that feedback, the more in alignment you are. So the more fulfillment that you experience. So that's what I wanted to share with you about your miracle power of acceptance. As usual, I think it's a rare person who will really take this to heart and appreciate the value of it. But that's who I do this for. So if you're that person, then you'll be able to get a lot of benefit from this. And I think you'll find that you don't need to chase so much. More and more can come to you and through you the more that you work with acceptance. This is not to say that you should not or will not take outer actions. Of course you will. So please understand, I'm not suggesting everybody should lock themselves in their rooms and just meditate all day. Uh, but In fact, I would say uh, that the more that you uh, work with and gain more skill with acceptance, the more that you'll find that you can benefit from all of the interactions with the world. Um, so that's pretty much it. If you've got questions or anything that you'd like to uh, explore a little bit further, then I welcome you to put those in the chat. If I can find the chat now that I think I can find it here. There we go. Um, so I welcome you to put those in the chat. I'll respond to the things in the chat until there's nothing left in the chat, and then we'll wrap up for today. I'll also just mention again for anybody who doesn't yet have access to the free self-awareness course that I highly recommend it. It includes a guided audio for working with the suggested practice for cultivating self-awareness. And I also included in along with that a bonus of a recording of the workshop that where I go over the ask framework. The ask framework allows it's a very simple framework, 3 steps. It's an acronym, ASK, that allow you to start to work with these principles uh, in real time in your life, especially when you feel uh, threatened in any way, which most of us feel threatened a lot. So that's all included in there for free. You can get that at joylot.com/SA. And again, I'll put that link in the description on YouTube. So I'll look through the chat here and see if there's any questions. Somebody says acceptance of really repulsive things can be hard. Yeah. Yeah. And so this is a good point. So don't make thank you for bringing that up. I recommend being always being gentle with yourself. I don't recommend placing unrealistic, unsustainable demands on yourself. Um, yes, this can be challenging because we've spent an entire lifetime and going in the opposite direction. And it's not just a single lifetime. We're dealing with countless generations and societies which have for thousands of years uh, gone in a totally different direction. So this is a radical approach. It kind of comes out of though a recognition that the way that you've done things and the way that society has done things and taught you to do things is not giving you the results that you want. And so having that recognition, then it's a matter of, okay, let me try this new way. And uh, but it's sort of like if you were going to try to uh, if you decided you were, let's say you'd been sitting on a couch for 30 years and you decide you're going to run a marathon. I wouldn't recommend trying to run the full marathon the first day because that just seems unrealistic. Could you take a step? Could you take that step consistently? If you take one step and then you go, you just kind of challenge that edge. So maybe you say, okay, maybe I could take 2 steps today. And when you can take 2 steps, then you consistently take 2 steps until you can take 3 steps. And you consistently take 3 steps until you can take 4 steps. And it might take a while. It's going to take however long it's going to take, but eventually you'll get there. And so it's the same with this. When we're going against the tide, so to speak. I mean, fundamentally we're not. Fundamentally we're going with the tide of nature, but there's a overlay, this very thick overlay of social conditioning, which goes the against that. And uh, since that conditioning is pretty strong, then I think be gentle and just take whatever step you can that's sustainable for you consistently. Because if you try to do it, if you say, okay, that's it from now on, I'm going to practice acceptance every single second of my life, whether it kills me or not, well, that might be difficult. And you might not make as good of progress. But if you just said, you know what, I'm going to practice acceptance, and here's how I'm going to do it. You come up with your own plan, and you just commit to doing that consistently every single day. Maybe you just say, you know, at the end of every day, I'm going to take 1 minute and I'm going to practice acceptance. Maybe, and then you can grow that. You say, okay, I've done that for a month and that seems to be working out all right. I'm doing well with that. So now I'm gonna take that to the next level. Maybe I'll my intention will be, in addition to practicing acceptance for 1 minute every day, I'm also going to uh, intend to practice acceptance at least one other time in real time, when I'm experiencing something challenging. And in that way, you can just slowly grow your skill, I'll just say. So sustainability is really important. Don't try to bite off more than you can chew. And there's always going to be an edge, I think, for everybody, uh, unless there's not. But for most of us, there's always going to be an edge. That edge shifts. So what seems really repulsive now will probably, as you practice acceptance, that will shift. That won't seem repulsive, but then something else will. And so as you continue to practice and work with it and grow your skill, then that edge will shift. Um, but there'll probably always be something. But the nice thing is, as that, it's sort of like if you, it's almost like we've all locked ourselves into these tiny little rims and it's dark and we're we're afraid to go out of the room, to open the door, to open the window, because now the light hurts us because we've been in the dark for so long, and the sounds hurt us, and the breeze hurts us. It's all very painful because we're not accustomed to it. But as you acclimate to it, then the very things that were at one time painful to you become very pleasant and supportive. So it's just a matter of one small step at a time. And as long as you do that consistently and persistently and gently and lovingly, then that that will continue to grow and you will benefit accordingly. Somebody says, I feel like I have contradictory desires regarding some things, like I don't know which one to let my mind land on. When I try to lean on either one, the other impulse sneaks in. This is why I recommend uh, writing, um, using the prompt, what is it I really want? And just write every day. and just write in an uncensored way. So just allow yourself to write whatever comes up, and you don't have to take any action on it. So give yourself permission that you don't need to take any action. Obviously, you, when you have sufficient clarity, you will take action. But when you put pressure on yourself to take action, to figure it out and take action, then ironically, it makes the whole thing take longer. So, uh, so my recommendation is every day, take a few minutes, write by hand, get a notebook, use a pen or pencil, and write by hand uh, your response to what is it that I really want, and write whatever comes up without censoring it. So there's a censor, there's a filter where that's there, and don't and just bypass the filter. Write whatever comes up. There's no obligation. There's no judgment. It doesn't have to be the truth. It's just write, be willing to engage in the process, sincerely write whatever comes up. And you'll see that you'll get more and more clarity day by day, week by week, month by month. And you just write, and feel free to write whatever comes up. So if what comes up is it doesn't have to be exactly a logical answer to what is it that I really want. It could be that as you ask yourself that question, you could have a thought that comes up that says exactly what you wrote here. I feel like I have contradictory desires regarding some things, like I don't know which one to let my mind land on. When I try to lean on either one, the other impulse sneaks in. So that could even be the kind of thing that you write. But as you're allowing that to express, then without trying, you're not trying to solve it. You're not trying to be to succeed or be right or anything. The only agenda is just to write in response to the prompt and allow what clarity comes to come. But there's no pressure for that clarity to show up at any time or in any particular way. If you're willing to do that, uh, I really honestly believe that within, it's hard to put an exact time frame on this, but let's say within 30 days, you will, if you go back through, then after 30 days, if you go back through and read what you've written, you'll see that there's a progression of clarity that has come through that. You'll recognize that in 30 days, you have much more clarity regarding these matters than you did when you started. And again, if you're trying to act on something before you have that clarity, then you'll have these kinds of problems. Now, there's more that I'll also throw in, because this person, the username here, I don't know who this person is. Maybe I know who you are, but I don't, because I don't recognize your username here. So I don't know if you have access to any of the other, I don't know if you have access to any of my programs, but if you do, um, then another thing is that you could also work with, you could also use a parts integration process here. I did share a very simple parts integration process on a YouTube video a couple weeks ago. I don't remember how long ago it was. It could have been a couple months ago, which could also be useful here, but that's a very simplified version. But you could use a parts integration method here as well. So if you have what seem to be contradictory desires, then you could treat that as two parts of you that have each, one part has one desire, one part has the other desire. And you could just dialogue one with each of the parts one at a time and find out what is it that they want through that, because there's a hierarchy of desire or values there. And so if you just dialogue and ask the parts, again, one at a time, what do you want through that? Um, you'll arrive at more clarity about what each of the parts is really aiming for, and then you could bring the two parts together within yourself and just ask them um, to uh, work together to find a new way to achieve what it is that they both want, that is uh, harmonious and fulfilling for both. And that will likely also be very helpful. And if that didn't make any sense to you, then don't do it. But if what I said made sense, then that could be really useful. Um, to the person who says the meeting started 30 minutes ago, that was no, the meeting started an hour before you posted that. I don't know if you're not in the US. If you're not in the US, it's probably because of the time change. So we changed time. We changed our clocks not this weekend, but the weekend before. It's a time we do this twice a year. Once a year we set the clocks ahead, and the other, and then 6 months later we set them back. Okay, so somebody says, how can we know more about getting more into alignment with our soul? Is it only a matter of ascertaining our values and working with those, or is there something further we can do, please? Well, you can certainly um so 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 what when you say getting ascertaining our values and working with those, that would be one level at which you could work, and um that's pretty accessible to everybody, which is why I do share how to do that. And that's more or less what I was just mentioning to the previous person with my suggestion about the parts integration approach is you can do a an elicitation of your values by asking, what do I want through that, or what will that give me, or what's important about that. So so you could make a list of all of your desires, and then for each of them you could go through and ask, rep, you do this recursively. uh when I have that, what will that give me, or what's important about that, until you get to these core values. So you'll have a core value that you're really trying to fulfill through each of the surface desires. Uh, Many of the core values will end up being the same. You're going to be trying to fulfill the same core values through different surface desires, and but you'll eventually then come up with a list of these core desires that you're really trying to fulfill through these surface desires, which is not necessarily to negate the surface desires. It's just to give more clarity about what it is that you're really wanting to achieve through that. It matters for a lot of reasons, among which is, if you think about any surface desire, if you want $1 million, well, there's plenty of different ways you could make $1 million, but not all of those ways of making $1 million would align with the core value or values that you're really trying to fulfill through your particular desire for that. Some people, they're just, for some people they want $1 million because they want power. And why do they want power? Because power will give them uh, peace. Some people want $1 million, and why do they want $1 million? Because when they have $1 million, that will give them all of the things that they want, all of the material things that they want, and when they have all the material things that they want, what will that give them? Then they'll be happy, and on and on. So it's not so how so identifying what it is that you're really wanting to fulfill through the surface desire will make it clearer to you how specifically uh, for you to approach that, because it makes a difference. And so that's one thing. And that's really, as I say, that's something that anybody can do. It doesn't require a lot of, uh, doesn't degree require a high degree of self-awareness. It doesn't require a lot of time. It doesn't require a person who's particularly mindful or slows down internally or anything like that. Anybody can do it. So that would be a great start for anybody. And that's still a slightly superficial layer. Um, so and I say that not to dismiss it in any way because it's still important. Because if you have unfulfilled desires, that ends up being problematic. So fulfilling your desires is really important. Um, Also being able to discern which are your desires and which are borrowed desires, even equally important because you don't need to fulfill the borrowed desires. You need to just let those go. But the desires that are authentically yours, it's important that you actually fulfill those. And it's important that you fulfill them in a way that's aligned with your values that you're wanting to fulfill through those desires. Hence the elicitation of the values and why that's important. And uh, as useful as all of that is, and maybe necessary and important, uh, there's also a much deeper, I would consider it a deeper uh, level to this. So, because you're wanting to be in alignment with your soul. So, in order to really do that, your soul is not, your soul doesn't have it doesn't speak, not in the way that you normally uh not in the way that you normally have thoughts or through words. So to really get in touch with that is a subtler thing, and that requires a subtler level of awareness. So breath awareness would be my number one suggestion, practicing breath awareness every day in a way that's sustainable for you. So make it enjoyable. Should be enjoyable. I mean, if it's not enjoyable, you're doing it wrong. Not that it has to be equally enjoyable every day. Some days you're going to have resistance, and other days you're going to look forward to it, and yada yada. But overall, in general, it should be enjoyable. And so if you're not finding it enjoyable, then make some adjustments. Probably in that case, try do less, because a lot of time people think more is better, but that's not true. What's best is what is optimal. So, and part of that is that should be enjoyable for you overall. Again, not necessarily equally enjoyable every day, but overall should be something that's enjoyable for you. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to be in balance with the rest of your life. So sometimes people take it to the extreme where they're practicing breath awareness for an hour, 2 hours every day, which isn't inherently problematic, but oftentimes it ends up being problematic because then people can get too detached from the rest of their lives. So there's a balance to be struck, but but certainly practicing breath awareness consistently is very helpful because it will give you more clarity about the nature of your soul, who you are, what's what. You know, you'll be able to better distinguish between your thoughts and your soul, your social conditioning and your soul, your egoic desires and your soul. I mean, it will all become clearer through that consistent. practice. Somebody somebody says, I'm very curious to know what your life really feels like. Do you feel in the flow most of the time, connected to creator, fulfilled, etc.? And what is your favorite practice? Um, I don't know that my if I was to attempt to answer that question, I'm not sure that it would be particularly helpful. Um, because it's not, I don't know that any of us have the, I don't think any of us have the same frame of reference, or that the words that we would use would mean the same thing. So if you're wanting to know, do I feel in the flow most of the time? But what you mean by in the flow most of the time and what I would mean by in the flow most of the time, I don't know how we would know if those mean the same thing. So I think it would probably be not particularly helpful for me to attempt to answer that. Let me see if there's something that I could say that would be helpful. I think here's what I could say. I think it's more about this is because this isn't really about me. Um, I mean, I understand that sometimes it seems like that uh, because you might think that I'm proposing that I have an experience that you should have. I don't think that that's if I suggest that sometimes, or if I outright say that, then that's not skillful on my part. Here's what I'm offering. I would say that relative to my own uh, sense of my past experience, uh, that I have experienced, I have I now perceive a significant relative improvement. Uh, so more peace of mind, more sense of ease, more trust, more inner gentleness, um, more calm, more patience. So it to me it's about relative uh to oneself rather than relative to somebody else. So because if I tried to compare myself to Ramana Maharshi, I don't know how I can do that, and I don't think that would be particularly helpful. Um, but I but I can compare relative to myself and measure growth, learning growth. So that's what I'm really wanting to offer is that um, you could see improvement in your own experience relative to your experience. So whatever it is that is troubling you now, you could see improvements in that. And the more of those improvements you see, the more that compounds. It makes it easier to have more and more of those improvements. So that's that's mostly what I can say about that. In terms of my favorite practice, I would say I think breath awareness is the most I find breath awareness to be the most effective, most accessible, most powerful, most transformative of the practices that I have that I am that I feel that I have knowledge enough to be able to share with other people. Hence the reason why I share it so much. All right. This here's a kind of long one. Is there a question here? I don't know. I'll read it. And then if there's a question, I'll respond. So I was observing what you were saying in myself, and I think constant impulses to do something on my phone or go somewhere or do something social media, plan for something in my head, need, grasp, etc. I realize it's all just tension and non-acceptance, but it's very, very subtle and so easy to overlook and hard to slow down into, but I was able to notice it now. It's constant 24/7, really, almost like an addict to all of it. So I guess practice and repetition will make that impulse less and less through awareness of the fact. Definitely. Yeah, I think that recognizing that, uh, I mean, let me just take a step back. So I'm not really, I'm not suggesting that people should do things, but I'm proposing some options that if you want to experience growth and improvements, if you presently experience pain, uh, any kind of psychic pain, mental pain, emotional pain, physical pain, also, uh, then and you'd like to improve that, then what I'm proposing is here's a way to do that. And so I think that having intrinsic motivation is really important. Don't do things just because I say, but rather, if you look to your actual experience and you notice as you've written that you're doing these things to yourself subtly and mostly unconsciously, and that's painful to you, and you want to change that, then uh, working with what it is that I've shared today and other things that I share uh, will very, very likely help you to shift that. So then you can experience more peace instead of pain. That's that's my thought about that. All right. So somebody here says we experience the world through the five senses: touch, taste, smell, sound, and sight. So the five senses are like a conduit for our experience of some sort. But where or who is having that experience? I know you said it's in consciousness before, but what does that mean? What is consciousness? Is it the awareness that's always there? Well, uh you might have added something unnecessary. So you say that the five senses are like a conduit for our experience. Um, so that's a model that uh, has that is giving rise to these questions, but you could question whether the model is actually true or necessary. Uh, did the five senses have to be like a conduit? Is that the only way it could be? You could notice that when you dream, so the dream state is analogous to the waking state. They're both we experience we have experience in both, and the experience consists of five senses. Um, so you could use the dream state as a way of understanding, maybe. So notice when there's a dream, when there's a dream, is there a conduit? Is there a conduit? Is that how the five senses ex uh, expressing as a conduit. It's not clear to me that that's the case. Um, so there's I mean, this is a mystery. Um, so, but the problem is we try to puzzle this mystery out with uh, faculties that are probably not capable of figuring it out. Um, and so maybe not the best way to approach it. Uh, but you could just consider what is the experience of a dream and see if that's of any help to you in this regard. One other thought about that is you could you could also use wholeness work for that inquiry. And the person who asked this question has, I believe, I think you have access, uh, you should have access to the course, the Living Wholeness course. So that's in wholeness work is in session 5 of Living Wholeness. So you could review that and apply that, and that would probably also be helpful. All right, I've got another one here. It says, I'm engaging in active relaxation. I feel plagued by sexual compulsions, my main escape route. It is burning so much and it pulls me out of the method. I don't know how to get out of the pattern. I feel helpless. Should I accept it and it will run out eventually? It feels like a forever game. Uh, I would probably need to know a little bit more. I mean, when you say sexual compulsions, um, is that uh I mean is that uh I'm not sure. That's too vague for me to know what that's referring to. Um, because it could because if you're dealing with um what I would consider to be normal, healthy sexual desires, which you express uh through I mean, and these are vague terms, but if that you express through normal, healthy sexual relationships, then that doesn't seem to be problematic. But if you're, but sometimes people have thoughts that that's a problem. But if this is something that's like a preoccupation that's causing you problems in your life, maybe you could give me a little bit more detail, and I could give you some suggestions. Somebody says, so whatever we resist and not accept keeps showing up in our lives until we sit down and work on accepting it, right? And then one small step at a time with practice. More or less, more or less, that seems to be the case. Yeah. Somebody here says dealing with longstanding issues with self-acceptance. Well, self-acceptance is Uh, Extremely important. So you can apply everything that I suggested here today uh, in order to help with that. As you're doing that, you might notice what are how does the self-rejection manifest? So if you're not accepting yourself, then you're rejecting yourself. And how do you know when you're rejecting yourself? And so you could, uh, what I'm suggesting now is not meant to be a substitute for the other things that I've suggested today. What I've suggested today would really be the foundation. But in addition to that, you could uh, identify what are the ways that you reject yourself. Possibly it could be through beliefs. So it, maybe specific memories, um, but maybe write them down, the specific ways in which you reject yourself. And then you could work through that list to accept each of those. So there are, I think what I gave today would be sufficient to do that. But if you aren't, I don't, I don't know, I don't remember if you have access to any of my courses. If you do, you could let me know which ones you have access to, and I might be able to give you some other suggestions of some other practices that could be supportive. But um, in the absence of that, just applying what it is that I suggested here today, both in general and in regard specifically to each of the ways that you habitually reject yourself, uh, would be useful. Of course, like I said earlier in response to somebody else, it's having intrinsic motivation is important. I mean, if you don't yet understand how painful and self-hurtful self-rejection is, if you haven't gotten to a point where you have really had enough of that and you are ready to commit to making a change because you want that, because you want to feel better, then it will be difficult. But this is why I also usually advocate for self-honesty. I mean, I think it's really just helpful, very powerful to do a honest look and get clear on how much you hurt yourself and to be really clear with yourself that you've had enough of that and to make a commitment that you're not going to do that to yourself any longer. Or let's say that you're commit you could make a commitment to make a change to that, to make a positive change. Um, when you have that when you have that clarity and that commitment, then you can definitely succeed with what it is that I've uh, suggested today. And keep in mind also that it's a process, so there's always going to be an edge. You'll probably continue to find over time ways that you reject yourself. So as you use what I've suggested and you process through things, you'll cross thresholds. You'll get to a point where you'll feel so much better, and because you won't be rejecting yourself in so many of the ways. But then whether it's months or years later, something else will come to your attention, and you'll realize, oh, I'm still rejecting myself in this way or that way. And then you can apply same processes there as well so that you can alleviate that self-induced harm. Um, but you can make significant improvements. Okay, so the person with the sexual compulsions clarifies that it's extreme fantasies, not healthy, obsessive thoughts, absolutely draining, overindulgence in the mental realm. So, in that case, um, what I would recommend is to work with. So this sounds like it would probably be m- uh, more, probably be faster to resolve this. You probably resolve it more efficiently um, by using something like core transformation. I don't know if you have access to any of my courses in which I've shared how to do that process. Um, but it sounds like consciously you experience it as draining, and you don't want to have the extreme fantasies consciously, but it's as though there's a part of you that's choosing the extreme fantasies, and that part of you has a positive intention, even though consciously you don't necessarily understand what that is yet. But this is resulting in a conflict within you between these two parts. So the conscious part that doesn't want the sexual fantasies or the extreme fantasies, and then the other part of you that's choosing the extreme fantasies for a positive intention. And so that conflict continues until you resolve it. And one pretty efficient way of doing that is using core transformation. You could get there is a it's a there's a book called I think it's just called Core Transformation by Connie Ray Andreas, and it's the last name is Andreas, Andreas. It's a pretty simple process. You could learn it from the book. I don't know that you I don't know I can't know that you would have success doing it from the book, but you might. I mean, you certainly could. All the information is there, so you could learn it from the book. And that would be one way to do it. I also have some trainings on how to use core transformation. So if you have access to any of those, then you could do that. Um, that I think that would be probably the most efficient way in combination with what I've suggested today, which you're using active relaxation in place of breath awareness, which is also very good. Um, so I would recommend using core transformation. Let me know how that goes for you. Somebody says problems are only limiting beliefs and sensations. Problems are only limiting beliefs and sensations. Uh, yeah, I would say that that's true. Um, yeah, I mean, if you don't uh, know anything about it, you can't know that it's a problem. So, in order to know that it's a problem, you'd have to think you know something about it, and you'd have to have a feeling, i.e., a sensation. So, yes, belief. I mean, I would say belief always includes a sensation. So, specifying sensation is redundant in this case, but definitely yes. Meaning and sensation, i.e., belief. Definitely. All right. Seems like maybe we got through all of it. In which case, we'll wrap up. Thank you to all of you. Blessings to you all. Take care. Bye for now.